3 hours after my Uber driver begged me not to go home, I watched my apartment building explode on the news and realized a complete stranger had just saved my life. I'm Sophia Brennan. I'm 28. I work in marketing, and I've always considered myself a logical person. I don't believe in psychics or gut feelings or random warnings from strangers. But on Thursday night, September 14th, all of that changed. Because sometimes the most insane thing someone tells you is actually the truth trying to save you. If you're curious to know how a 5-minute Uber ride turned into the most terrifying night of my life, make sure to subscribe and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It was 9:47 p.m., and I was on top of the world. I'd just left Marcello's, this upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Seattle, where my team had thrown me a celebration dinner. After 2 years of late nights, missed weekends, and more coffee than any human should consume, I'd finally gotten the promotion I'd been chasing. Senior marketing consultant, corner office, 20% raise, everything I'd worked for. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with congratulations texts. My boss had given a toast. My coworkers had insisted on ordering champagne. For those 2 hours, I felt like I'd actually made it. But now, standing outside the restaurant in my black cocktail dress and heels that were already killing my feet, I just wanted to go home. I wanted to change into my pajamas, pour myself a real glass of wine, and maybe call my brother Derek to tell him about the whole night. Derek had called me earlier, right before dinner, his voice full of pride. "Soph, I'm so proud of you. I wish I could be there to celebrate properly." I'd laughed it off. "You're in Boston. It's fine. I'm fine." "You're always fine," he'd said. "But you know you don't have to do everything alone, right?" The truth is, I'd been living in Seattle for 8 months, and I still felt like I was playing house. My apartment was nice, this converted warehouse building on Pine Street with exposed brick and tall windows. But it was just me. No roommate, no boyfriend, just me and my work laptop and takeout containers I forgot to throw away. Standing on the sidewalk, I pulled out my phone and requested an Uber, 4 minutes away. Perfect. The Uber pulled up, a silver Toyota Camry. The driver was middle-aged, maybe in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes. His name tag said Ravi Patel. "Sophia?" he asked. "That's me. Going to Pine Street, yes? Building 447? "Yes, please." He nodded and pulled into traffic. I leaned back against the seat, finally relaxing after being on all night. The city lights blurred past as we drove through downtown. I was already thinking about tomorrow's 9 o'clock meeting, mentally reviewing my presentation. That's when I noticed Mr. Patel looking at me in the rearview mirror. Not just a quick glance. He kept looking. His eyes would dart to the road, then back to me, then to the road again. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than seemed necessary. I shifted uncomfortably and checked that my seatbelt was fastened. We drove in silence for what felt like forever. The tension in the car was building, and I didn't understand why. Then, at a red light on 5th Avenue, he spoke. "Miss, I have to tell you something important." His voice was shaking. I sat up straighter. "Okay? Please don't go home tonight." I blinked. "What?" "I'm serious. Something is very wrong. Please, you cannot go to your apartment tonight." I laughed nervously. "I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" The light turned green. He drove forward, but slower now. 20 minutes ago, I dropped off 2 men at your building. I remember the address because it's unusual. The old warehouse buildings on Pine Street. My stomach tightened. The men were in my back seat, and they were arguing. Loud. Angry. They thought I couldn't understand them, but I speak their language. "What language?" I asked. "That's not important. What's important is what they said." He glanced at me again, and I saw real fear in his eyes. They said apartment 4C. They said they're going tonight. They said no one will know until it's too late. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I live in apartment 4C. They said your apartment number multiple times, Mr. Patel said quietly. And the way they were talking, these are not good men. These are men planning to do something very bad. My mind was racing. This couldn't be real. This sounded like something from a movie. "I think you're mistaken," I said weakly. "There are lots of apartments in that building. Maybe you heard wrong." I didn't hear wrong. Or maybe it's a different building. It's not. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking. Look, I appreciate your concern, but this sounds crazy. How would random criminals even know my apartment number? This doesn't make sense. I know it sounds crazy, he said, his voice cracking. My daughter, she's a police officer. She tells me all the time that I worry too much. But miss, I heard what I heard, and I cannot drop you off at that building knowing what I know. Part of me wanted to demand he take me home. Part of me wanted to jump out at the next light. But another part of me was terrified that he was telling the truth. What do you want me to do? I asked. He pulled over to the curb. We were 2 blocks from my building now. He turned around to face me fully, sweat visible on his forehead. I want you to trust me, just for tonight, just until we know for sure. Then he reached for his wallet. My body tensed, but he pulled out a business card and handed it to me. Detective Rachel Ortega, Seattle Police Department, Violent Crimes Unit. This is my daughter, Mr. Patel said. Call her, right now. Tell her Ravi Patel sent you. Tell her what I told you. She'll believe me even if you don't. I stared at the card. It looked official, but anyone could print a fake business card. Please, he said again. Just call her. I looked up at him, this stranger who was either trying to save my life or running the most elaborate scam I'd ever seen. And I had to make a choice. Trust him, or don't. Go home, or don't. Believe that something terrible was waiting for me in apartment 4C, or believe that I was being paranoid. My finger hovered over my phone screen, the detective's number already typed in. Everything in my logical brain screamed that this was insane. But my hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone, and somewhere deep in my gut, I knew something was very, very wrong. I stared at the business card in my hand, Detective Rachel Ortega's name printed in clean black letters. My thumb hovered over the call button on my phone, but I couldn't make myself press it. What was I supposed to say? Hi, I'm in an Uber with your dad and he thinks someone's trying to hurt me? It sounded ridiculous even in my head. I looked up at Mr. Patel through the rearview mirror and saw him watching me with this desperate expression, like my next move would determine everything. Part of me still thought this had to be some kind of mistake, some weird misunderstanding that would make sense once I got home and saw that everything was perfectly normal. But another part of me, the part that made my hands shake and my heart race, knew that normal people don't beg strangers not to go home. Normal Uber drivers don't pull over 2 blocks from your destination and hand you their daughter's police detective card. Normal men don't look this scared unless something is genuinely wrong. I took a breath and pressed call. The phone rang twice before a woman's voice answered, professional and slightly annoyed. Detective Ortega. Her tone was clipped, like she'd been interrupted in the middle of something important. Hi, my name is Sophia Brennan, and I'm in an Uber with someone who says he's your father, and he told me to call you because something really strange is happening, and I don't know what to do. The words tumbled out in a rush, barely coherent. There was a pause on the other end, long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then her voice came back, sharper now, more alert. You're with my dad? Ravi Patel? What's going on? Is he okay? I glanced at Mr. Patel, who was still turned around in his seat, watching me intensely. He's fine, but he's really worried. He says he overheard 2 men in his car earlier talking about my apartment, and he thinks something bad is going to happen tonight. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it cracked on the last word. Detective Ortega's tone shifted completely, losing all trace of annoyance. What apartment? What did they say exactly? I repeated everything Mr. Patel had told me, about the 2 men, about them speaking a language they thought he wouldn't understand, about them mentioning apartment 4C multiple times, about them saying tonight, saying no one would know until it was too late. The detective was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her breathing, thinking, okay, listen to me carefully. What's your address? I gave it to her, my voice barely above a whisper. Stay in the car. Do not go near that building. Where's my dad? I handed the phone to Mr. Patel, and he took it with shaking hands. They spoke rapidly in another language, his voice urgent and pleading, hers calm but firm. I couldn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. He was trying to convince her this was serious. She was already taking action. After what felt like forever, he handed the phone back to me. "Sophia, I'm sending units to your building right now," Detective Ortega said. "But I need you to not go home tonight. Do you have somewhere else you can stay? Family nearby? A hotel?" My mind went blank. Family. Derek was across the country in Boston. Friends? I'd been so focused on work since moving here that I hadn't exactly built a strong social network. "I can get a hotel," I managed to say. "Good. Do that. I'll call you back within the hour once we've checked things out. And Sophia, my father doesn't panic easily. If he's this worried, you should listen to him." She hung up, and I sat there in the back seat, my entire body numb. Mr. Patel was still pulled over, still watching me. "What do you want to do?" he asked softly. I looked past him, down the street toward my building. From here I could see the corner of it, the familiar brick facade, the windows of apartments where my neighbors were probably watching TV or getting ready for bed. Everything looked so normal, so safe. "Can you just drive past it?" I asked. "Just so I can see? Maybe everything's fine and we're both being paranoid." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but just drive past. No stopping." He pulled back into traffic and turned onto Pine Street. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. We approached my building, and I pressed my face close to the window, looking for anything unusual. At first, everything seemed normal. The main entrance, the lobby lights, a couple walking their dog on the sidewalk. Then I saw it. A white van parked in the loading zone, the same spot where delivery trucks usually parked during the day. Something about it made my blood run cold. "That van," I said, my voice strange and distant. "I've seen that van before, yesterday morning when I left for work, and the day before that. It was parked in the exact same spot." Mr. Patel slowed down even more, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the van. It was plain white, no company logos, no markings. The windows were tinted dark. "That's not normal," he said quietly. And suddenly, horribly, I knew he was right. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't paranoia. Something was very, very wrong. Mr. Patel drove past my building without stopping, and I twisted in my seat to keep watching through the back window until we turned the corner and it disappeared from view. My heart was still pounding, my mind racing through every possible explanation for that white van. Maybe it belonged to a contractor doing work in the building. Maybe it was a new tenant moving in. Maybe I was connecting dots that didn't actually form a picture. But the sick feeling in my stomach told me otherwise. Mr. Patel pulled over again a few blocks away, this time in front of a coffee shop that had already closed for the night. He turned around to face me fully, and I could see the worry etched deep in his face. "You need to call someone. Your family. Your friends. You need to go somewhere safe tonight." I nodded, my fingers already pulling up my contacts. Derek's name was right at the top. I pressed call and waited, praying he'd answer even though it was past midnight on the East Coast. He picked up on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Soph? What's wrong?" Just hearing his voice made something break inside me. "Derek, something really scary is happening and I don't know what to do." I heard rustling, the sound of him sitting up in bed. "What? Are you okay? Where are you?" I told him everything, the words spilling out faster now. The Uber driver's warning, the two men talking about apartment 4C, the white van I'd seen parked outside my building for days, Detective Ortega sending police units to check it out. By the time I finished, Derek was fully awake and already typing on his computer. I could hear the keyboard clicking through the phone. "Okay, listen to me. I'm booking you a hotel right now. The Marriott on 4th Avenue. It's 10 minutes from where you are. I'm putting it on my card. You're going to go there, check in, and you're not leaving that room until we know what's going on. Understand?" His voice had that protective edge I'd heard my whole life, the tone that meant he was taking charge whether I liked it or not. "Okay," I whispered. "I'm serious, Sophia. You don't go home. You don't go near that building. I don't care if the cops say it's fine. You stay in that hotel tonight." I could hear the fear underneath his commands, and it made everything feel more real. If Derek was this scared, and he was 2,000 miles away just hearing about it, then I should be terrified. I will. I promise. He exhaled slowly. I'm looking at flights right now. I can be there by tomorrow afternoon. You don't have to do that. You have work and I don't care about work. You're my sister. I'm coming. Tears stung my eyes. Okay, thank you. We stayed on the phone while he finished the hotel reservation, and then he made me promise 3 more times that I'd go straight there and stay put. When we finally hung up, I looked at Mr. Patel, who'd been sitting quietly the whole time, giving me privacy but clearly listening. My brother booked me a hotel, the Marriott on 4th Avenue. He nodded and immediately put the address in his GPS. Good, I'll take you there, and I'm not leaving until I see you walk inside safely. Something about his fierce protectiveness, this complete stranger who'd already done so much, made my throat tight. I don't understand why you're doing all this. You could have just dropped me off and forgotten about it. Why do you care so much? His eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, and they were shiny with unshed tears. Because I have a daughter your age, Rachel, and if she was in danger, I would want someone to help her, even if it meant looking foolish or crazy. I would want someone to care. He started driving, and I sat back in my seat, watching the city pass by through windows that suddenly felt too exposed. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek with the hotel confirmation number and another message. Stay safe. I love you. Call me when you get to the room. I typed back quickly. I will. Love you too. Another buzz. This time it was an unknown number, but I knew who it was before I even opened it. Detective Ortega. Officers are at your building. Investigating now. Stay where you are. We'll update soon. I showed the message to Mr. Patel. He read it and nodded grimly. Good. They'll figure out what's happening. But I couldn't shake the image of that white van sitting there in the same spot for 3 days. Watching. Waiting. We pulled up to the Marriott, and true to his word, Mr. Patel parked and walked me all the way to the lobby doors. I tried to pay him for the ride, but he refused, waving away my extended cash. Just promise me you'll be careful, and call your brother when you get to your room. I promised, and he waited until I was inside before walking back to his car. I watched him drive away. This man named Ravi Patel, who'd decided my life was worth saving. I checked into the hotel in a daze, barely registering the cheerful front desk clerk who handed me a key card and wished me a pleasant stay. Pleasant. The word felt absurd. I took the elevator to the 4th floor, found room 412, and locked every lock on the door the moment I stepped inside. The room was generic and clean, the kind of place that could be anywhere in America. Beige walls, floral bedspread, a landscape painting that meant nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my black celebration dress, my heels kicked off by the door. My phone said 11:34 p.m. Less than 2 hours ago, I'd been laughing with coworkers, toasting my promotion, thinking about how perfect my life was becoming. Now, I was hiding in a hotel room because a stranger thought someone wanted to hurt me. I called Derek like I promised, and his voice was steady and calm, talking me through breathing exercises until my hands stopped shaking quite so badly. We stayed on the phone for almost an hour, him telling me stories about his day, about his coworker who kept microwaving fish in the office kitchen, anything to keep my mind occupied. Finally, he made me promise to try to sleep, to keep my phone charged and next to me, to call him immediately if anything happened. I promised, and we hung up, but sleep was impossible. I sat there in that hotel room, refreshing my email, refreshing the news, checking for any updates from Detective Ortega. Nothing. Just silence. Maybe it really was nothing. Maybe tomorrow I'd laugh about this whole paranoid episode, about how I let an Uber driver convince me to abandon my apartment over a conversation he might have misunderstood. I turned on the TV just for background noise, flipping through channels without really watching anything. A cooking show, a late-night talk show, the local news running their standard evening recap. I was about to turn it off when the screen changed. Breaking news in red letters. My finger froze on the remote. A reporter standing in front of a building lit up by emergency vehicle lights, fire trucks, and ambulances crowding the street. I couldn't breathe. It was my building, "We're here at Pine Street where a massive explosion has rocked this residential building just before midnight," the reporter was saying, her voice urgent and professional. "Emergency crews are on the scene. Multiple injuries have been reported. Residents are being evacuated as firefighters work to contain the blaze on the 4th floor." The 4th floor. My floor. The camera panned across the scene, and I saw flames pouring from windows, thick black smoke rising into the night sky. I saw my neighbors standing on the sidewalk in their pajamas, some of them crying, others just staring in shock. I saw the white van, still parked in the loading zone, now surrounded by police tape. My phone started ringing and I nearly dropped it. "Detective Ortega. Sophia, are you watching the news?" Her voice was tight, controlled. "Yes. Oh my God, what happened? Was it really a gas leak?" There was a long pause, the kind that means the answer is going to change everything. "No, it wasn't a gas leak. My father saved your life tonight." My entire body went cold. She continued, her words careful and measured. "6 months ago, you flagged some suspicious invoices during an audit at your previous company. Do you remember that?" I searched my memory. 6 months ago, I'd been working at a tech startup, doing their quarterly financial review. I'd found some irregularities, reported them to my supervisor, and moved on. It had seemed like such a small thing. I remember, I thought it was just accounting errors. It wasn't errors. You uncovered a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. 3 men were arrested because of your report. But the person running the operation, the one really in charge, he got away. And he's been planning this for weeks. I couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was telling me. They'd been watching your routine. They knew you came home from work around 10:30 most nights. They planted a device in your apartment set to detonate at 11:15, 15 minutes after you'd normally arrive home. It was designed to look like a gas explosion. You were supposed to be there when it went off. I looked at the clock on the nightstand. 12:47 a.m. I should be dead. If I'd come straight home from dinner, if Mr. Patel hadn't said anything, if I'd ignored his warning like every logical part of my brain had wanted to do, I would be dead. But you stayed late celebrating tonight, Detective Ortega continued. And my father noticed those men in his car. He heard them confirming the apartment number, talking about the timing. He knew something was wrong. The TV showed firefighters spraying water on my building, the 4th floor completely gutted. My apartment, where I'd lived for 8 months, where all my belongings were, where I should have been sleeping tonight, was gone, destroyed. And I was alive only because a stranger decided to care. The next 48 hours were a blur of police stations, witness statements, and news cameras that I refused to talk to. Detective Ortega called me every few hours with updates. They'd arrested 4 people connected to the explosion. The man who'd orchestrated everything, Marcus Whelan, had been the CFO at my old company. The embezzlement scheme I'd uncovered had cost him everything: his job, his reputation, his freedom when the investigation expanded. And he'd decided that I was the reason for all of it. They found detailed surveillance logs in his apartment, photos of me leaving for work, coming home, going to the gym on Saturdays. He'd been watching me for months, learning my patterns, planning the perfect murder disguised as an accident. The device they'd planted was sophisticated, designed to rupture the gas line and create an explosion that investigators would blame on old building infrastructure. I would have been just another tragic news story, a young woman killed in her own home, and no one would have suspected it was anything but terrible luck. But Ravi Patel had suspected, and that changed everything. 3 days after the explosion, I met him for coffee at a small cafe in Capitol Hill. He walked in wearing a simple button-down shirt and khakis, looking exactly like what he was, a normal person who'd made an extraordinary choice. We sat across from each other, and I didn't know where to start. "I keep trying to find the right words to thank you," I finally said, "but everything sounds too small for what you did." He smiled sadly and wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "You don't need to thank me. I just did what felt right." I shook my head. "But you didn't have to. You could have dropped me off and forgotten about it. You could have decided it wasn't your problem. Most people would have." He was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee. "Can I tell you something? That night, when I heard those men talking, my first thought was to stay quiet, to mind my own business. Because what if I was wrong? What if I caused a scene over nothing? What if you reported me and I lost my job? My chest tightened. So what changed your mind? He looked up at me, his eyes serious. I thought about my daughter, Rachel. She's 26, lives alone in the city, works terrible hours. And I thought, if someone heard something that could save her life, would they speak up? Or would they stay quiet because it was easier, because it was safer, because they didn't want to look foolish? He paused. I decided I wanted to live in a world where people speak up, so I had to be that person. Derek arrived that afternoon, pulling me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. He stayed for 2 weeks, helping me find a new apartment, replacing everything I'd lost, barely leaving my side. We were closer now than we'd been in years, the crisis stripping away all the small distances we'd let build between us. The media called me lucky. My old company issued a public apology for the danger their former employee had put me in. Strangers on the internet debated whether I should have seen it coming, whether I'd been careless, whether the whole thing could have been avoided. But none of them understood the real lesson. I'd spent 28 years building my life on logic and control. I believed that if I worked hard enough, planned carefully enough, I could protect myself from random tragedy. I thought danger was something that happened to other people who weren't careful, who didn't have their lives together like I did. And then a stranger in an Uber shattered that illusion and saved my life in the process. 6 months later, I'm living in a new apartment closer to Derek, who relocated to Seattle to be near me. I volunteer with a victims advocacy group now, talking to people who've survived situations they never saw coming. I carry pepper spray. I trust my instincts more. But the biggest change is that I listen. When someone seems worried, when something feels off, when a stranger extends a warning that sounds irrational or crazy. Because Ravi Patel taught me that sometimes the most unbelievable thing is actually the truth trying to save you. Sometimes survival means trusting people you don't know. Sometimes goodness exists in the most unexpected places. And sometimes a 5-minute Uber ride is the difference between life and death. I think about that celebration dinner constantly, how I almost died on the best day of my professional life, how close I came to dismissing Ravi completely, because logic told me his warning couldn't be real. Every small decision that led to me being here, alive, telling you this story, Ravi didn't have to say anything. He could have collected his fare and moved on to the next passenger, but he chose to care, even when it was uncomfortable, even when I might have thought he was crazy. That's the world I want to live in, where we choose to care even when it's inconvenient, where we trust that small voice that says something's wrong, where we speak up even when silence is easier, because 3 hours can change everything, and sometimes a stranger's whisper is the loudest warning you'll ever receive. If this story moved you, please subscribe, because I share real stories about survival, intuition, and the moments that change everything. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Stay safe out there, and remember, trust your gut, but also trust when someone else's gut is trying to protect you.